Have you ever wondered if the story of Adam and Eve has been told the way it was meant to be? What if I told you that there's an ancient version of the Bible that reveals a completely different account, one that's hidden away, largely unknown to the world? This version doesn't have Eve being formed from Adam's rib. Instead, she is created from something far more extraordinary, divine light itself. Surprising, right? I'm talking about the Ethiopian Bible, a mysterious and ancient text that holds secrets the world has never fully explored. For centuries, this sacred book, written in the ancient language of Ge'ez, has captivated scholars and seekers alike. It contains 81 books, many more than the Protestant Bible's 66, or even the Catholic Bible's 73. And within those pages, a whole new version of the Adam and Eve story is waiting to be discovered. But why has this story been so hidden? And what truths does it hold that can transform our understanding of creation? Here's the kicker. The Ethiopian Bible is not just about adding details. It's about fundamentally altering what we thought we knew. It challenges us to see the Garden of Eden not as a simple earthly paradise, but as a divine realm where heaven and earth meet in an intersection of light beauty and unimaginable mystery. Are you ready to take a deeper dive into the untold truths that have been buried for millennia? Before we move on, I want you to comment 777 below if you're ready to uncover the hidden truths of humanity's beginning. What if everything you thought you knew about the origins of man and woman was only a small part of the story? Stay with me as we unravel this fascinating journey together. So let's step into the pages of the Ethiopian Bible and begin our quest to uncover the true story of Adam and Eve, one that could reshape everything we thought we knew. Ready? Let's go. How the Ethiopian Bible reveals the true story of Adam and Eve. Imagine for a moment that the very first human being was not sculpted from ordinary dust, as so many of us have heard since childhood, but instead from a rare sacred earth collected from the farthest reaches of the cosmos. According to the Ethiopian Bible, this is precisely how it happened. Doesn't that thought alone stir something deep within you to realize your own story might be far more wondrous than you ever imagined? In the mesmerizing pages of the Book of Kings, chapters 3, 12-5, it is written that the Creator summoned his mighty angels and dispatched them to the four edges of the universe. Picture this scene. One angel soaring toward the glowing east, where the sun bursts forth each morning in regal splendor. Another racing to the west, where sunsets paint the heavens in gold and crimson. A third ventured into the frozen breath of the north, where sheets of ice hold ancient secrets, while the fourth flew to the south, drenched in warm breezes that whisper of life. From each distant corner, these angels gathered handfuls of hallowed earth, each grain kissed by the dew of heaven and bathed in the gentle radiance of countless stars. Isn't it astonishing to think how much care went into shaping the very matter that would become the first of us? Unlike the brief mention in Genesis that man was formed from the dust of the ground here, we see a divine choreography across the universe, almost as if God was painting with all the colors of creation itself. Could this deeper process be a subtle reminder that your own existence is crafted from layers of divine intention, stretching far beyond what your eyes can see? Then comes the breath, or more accurately, something far greater than breath. In the book of Kafal, chapter 2, 23-27, we're told that when Adam's body was perfectly fashioned, the Creator did not merely infuse it with a common breath. Instead, He placed within Adam a radiant spark drawn from his very own spirit. Imagine what it must have been like to witness that moment, the lifeless form suddenly surging with light eyes, opening like clear crystals that could pierce beyond the veil of the visible. If you had stood there among the heavenly host, would you have felt a tremor of awe to see a being holding a fragment of God's own essence? This divine spark was so vivid that it blazed within Adam's gaze. According to the book of Enoch 12:4-8, the very first time Adam opened his eyes, beams of light streamed forth so powerfully they flooded the entire garden in brilliance. The angels themselves had to shield their faces, for the radiance was of the same nature as the light of the Creator. What would you have done if suddenly surrounded by such overwhelming glory? These aren't mere poetic embellishments to entertain idle minds. They whisper of a profound mystery, that within humanity lies a piece of God's own light. Could this be why Scripture later tells us in Psalm 82:6, "You are God's, you are all sons of the Most High"? And might it explain why even today your soul sometimes aches for something higher? A distant home you can't quite name, but long for with every beat of your heart. In a world that often tries to convince you that you are nothing more than accidents of dust and time, how does it change your view to realize you might carry within you the very luminescence that once caused angels to turn away in holy awe? If this is true, what possibilities await you that you've never dared to explore? The story doesn't end here, of course. There are more revelations tucked within these ancient texts, secrets that might forever shift how you see not only Adam and Eve, but your own sacred journey. Would you journey deeper if it meant uncovering who you truly are? Consider what it truly means that Adam was fashioned from earth, gathered from all four corners of the universe. This is no casual detail tucked into an old scroll. It's a revelation that humankind was meant to embody a harmony of all creation, to carry within a living testament to the balance of opposing forces that shape our cosmos. Can you sense how extraordinary that is? That you, as a descendant of Adam, might contain echoes of blazing suns and frozen wastelands, of gentle dawns and fierce storms. The book of Cast in verses 3:28-30 draws us even deeper into this breathtaking truth. It tells us that after shaping Adam with such meticulous care, the Creator didn't simply leave him to wander and wonder. Instead, He opened the vaults of heaven and taught Adam the sacred language of angels, a language woven from the very patterns of creation itself. Imagine standing there beside Adam as the Creator's voice flowed through the garden syllables, pulsing with light, each word unlocking hidden chambers of the universe. Would your heart have raced to hear mysteries that even the stars still whisper about through this divine tongue? Adam was not only able to speak, he was granted the profound capacity to perceive the secret essence of all things. So when he named the creatures and the growing things of the earth, it was not a simple act of labeling. It was a holy recognition, calling forth the true nature of each being with words that resonated like chords struck upon the strings of existence. Could this be why Proverbs 18:21 declares, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue"? From the very beginning, language was never meant to be mere symbols scratched on clay or parchment. It was the breath of understanding that could awaken or still the very forces of nature. Does this ancient account not cast a new light on why so many cultures throughout history have believed in the potency of words, in blessings that heal, in curses that devastate, in chants that summon rain or hold back the night? Perhaps deep down, humanity has always been trying to reclaim a fragment of that original speech, that first language that wove Adam's spirit to the hidden architecture of creation. And if Adam's eyes once shone with divine comprehension, seeing not just shapes and colors, but the luminous truth beneath all appearances, what might that imply about your own soul? Is there still a dormant ember of that clarity smoldering within you, waiting to be fanned into flame? How different might your life look if you could glimpse even a sliver of the world, as Adam once did, with eyes that penetrated to the sacred heart of all things? This story doesn't just reach backward into the mists of time, it stretches its hand into your own present, urging you to consider, what words are you speaking over your life and over others? Could there be a reason why your very speech feels charged at times with joy or sorrow, as if it carries weight beyond simple sound? Perhaps you are closer to that original gift than you dare to dream. And isn't that a mystery worth exploring a little further? While the tale of Adam's creation already stretches the imagination to its very edge, what the Ethiopian Bible reveals about Eve might send a shiver of wonder through even the most skeptical heart. It turns out, the true story of Eve, hidden for ages in these ancient texts, is even more breathtaking than most could have guessed. Can you picture standing there in that garden, watching this unfold before your eyes, contrary to the familiar narrative many of us learned as children, that Eve was shaped from a rib plucked from Adam's side? The book of Cran Nagast, chapters 4:8-12, offers a revelation so profound it could transform how you view the very fabric of humanity. It describes how while Adam lay in a profound dream-wrapped sleep, the Creator did something wondrous. He reached into the heavens themselves and gathered the purest beams of light streaming from the morning stars. With delicate care, almost like a master craftsman shaping glass from molten brilliance, God crystallized this radiant light into the living form of Eve. Imagine for a heartbeat what it must have been like to see her take shape. Her body aglow with a tender luminance, soft and ethereal, like moonlight spilling across still waters. Her soul shimmered with the wisdom of angels' mysteries, from realms Adam's eyes had never touched. Could this be why, from the very start, there has always been something about a woman's intuition that feels almost otherworldly? But it doesn't stop there. The book of Kwale, chapters 3:4-7, drives this revelation even deeper. It proclaims that Eve was not merely a fragment of Adam carved from his flesh, but a wholly independent masterpiece designed to bear her own divine illumination. She was not Adam's echo, but his complement crafted with secrets only she could perceive. How stirring is it to think that from the moment of her awakening, Eve was gifted with sight into realms Adam could not glimpse, an understanding of truths Adam could never fully grasp. Does this not cast an entirely new light on the dignity and equality woven into humanity's very beginning? Long before the rise of modern debates, here lay an ancient testament to the balanced brilliance of man and woman, two luminous beings, each reflecting unique facets of their maker. Perhaps that's why Proverbs 31 sings the praises of a woman whose wisdom and strength surpass even the treasures of kings. Could it also be why in so many of your own moments you've sensed that certain insights come unbidden to you, like whispers of a truth, older than the sun? And if Eve's soul contained angelic wisdom, what possibilities might dwell dormant in you, waiting to awaken? Might there be depths within your own spirit that yearn to be stirred by the same divine light that once fashioned Eve from starfire? This story, ancient yet alive, invites you to linger a little longer. What might it mean for your own life that humanity began not with hierarchy, but with two radiant creations, each carrying pieces of the eternal, designed to walk side by side under the gaze of heaven? Isn't that a question worth holding close to your heart as this unfolding story draws you deeper into its luminous mystery? One of the most captivating wonders hidden within these ancient writings is the intimate bond that Adam and Eve once shared with their Maker. The Book of Enoch, chapters 15:8-1, offers a portrait of this relationship so vivid, it seems to breathe. Each morning, while dew still adorned the blades of grass like tiny jewels, Adam and Eve would pause and listen. Across the hush of paradise, they could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps, the very footsteps of the Creator himself strolling through the garden he had so lovingly formed. Can you imagine standing barefoot on that sacred ground, feeling the gentle vibration of those steps in the soil beneath your feet? His voice, they say, was like music, more beautiful than any harp or flute could ever produce, cascading through the trees and over the waters, with melodies that made their hearts leap. And when he drew near, his presence sent ripples of golden light dancing across every leaf and petal, as if the entire garden had been dipped in molten gold. How might your soul respond if you were suddenly bathed in that same luminous glow, hearing words that didn't just reach your ears, but awakened something deep within your spirit? The Ethiopian scriptures go even further, describing the astounding capacities this first couple possessed. In the book of Konos, chapters 5:15-18, it is recorded that Adam and Eve were not bound by the same limitations we now endure. Their eyes were lit with divine wisdom, allowing them to see far beyond the material, to perceive the hidden, the invisible. They could hear the songs of angels drifting across eternity, comprehend the speech of every living creature, and grasp mysteries embedded in the rustling of leaves or the sigh of the wind. Even more astonishing, they could look both backward into ages past and forward into times yet unborn. Doesn't that stir a secret longing in you to recover even a fragment of such sight? Yet as dazzling as these gifts were, they came tethered to a weighty responsibility. The Book of Kufa, chapters 3:20-23 solemnly warns that with immense power always comes immense accountability. The Creator granted Adam and Eve the gift of choice, a freedom that soared as high as the heavens, but also could plunge as deep as any abyss. This was the first covenant ever made between God and humankind. They were free to chart their own course. Yet each decision would unfurl ripples that could not be gathered back. What might it have felt like to stand at the dawn of all things, holding such vast power in your hands, knowing the future of creation itself would bend under the weight of your choices? Perhaps this is why, even now, echoes of that original covenant still stir in our own hearts whenever we're faced with decisions that could shape not just our lives, but the lives of countless others. Doesn't it make you wonder whether the struggles you face today are shadows of that first mighty responsibility? And so, we arrive at a haunting question. If Adam and Eve were formed with such brilliance, so attuned to heaven's secrets, and entrusted with a trust that angels themselves marveled at what could possibly have led to their tragic fall, how did all those extraordinary abilities slip away like mist under the rising sun? The answer to that mystery lies buried within the ancient account of Eden's temptation, a version in the Ethiopian Bible that carries shocking revelations waiting to be unearthed. But that dear soul is a story we shall soon unfold, and it promises to turn everything you thought you knew upside down. Are you ready to follow it into deeper shadows and perhaps find a light there meant just for you? According to the ancient Ethiopian Bible, humanity's first paradise was not merely a garden planted somewhere on Earth's rolling plains. It was something far more marvelous, a sacred threshold poised between the material and spiritual realms, a bridge where heaven and earth touched hands. Does that thought not stir something deep within you, as if part of your soul remembers walking there long ago? The Book of Kenest, chapter 6, 1-5, paints a vision of Eden so breathtaking, it almost seems woven from dreams. It tells of a majestic mountain rising high above the world, so lofty that its crown brushed against the very gates of heaven. From its luminous summit flowed 4 rivers, not of common water, but streams of living crystal, carrying divine light through the garden's jeweled pathways. Imagine standing there, feeling that radiant current swirl around your ankles. Would it tingle with a secret energy that whispered truths your heart had always longed to hear? The air itself was infused with the essence of eternal life, so that each breath drawn into the lungs of Adam and Eve did more than sustain their bodies. It filled their minds with wisdom. What might it be like to inhale such a breath, to feel your thoughts instantly unfurl with understanding, as if hidden scrolls within your spirit had suddenly been opened by an invisible hand? As evening approached and the sky softened to molten gold, the Ethiopian Book of Kafal, chapters 4, 8-12, describes something even more wondrous. In the hush of twilight, when the last beams of sun melted across Eden, the Creator would appear in a form of pure, resplendent light. Imagine witnessing such a moment, the garden bathed in golden glow, then suddenly ablaze with an even brighter brilliance as God's presence descended. Adam and Eve spoke with him directly, not through cryptic signs or veiled mysteries, but face to face, learning the hidden workings of the universe and speaking fluently in the languages of every bird, beast, and blooming flower. Could you ever turn away from such communion if it were offered to you now? But perhaps the most striking revelation lies in how these sacred writings describe the rules within this enchanted realm. The Ethiopian Book of Enoch, chapters 16, 15-9, unveils a vision far deeper than the simple tale many have heard. In Eden stood not just one mysterious tree, but 3, each a living fountain of divine purpose. There was the tree of life, bestowing immortality on those who partook of its fruit. Beside it flourished the tree of light, source of all celestial energy that could illuminate even the darkest corners of the soul. And there, standing as both promise and test, grew the tree of knowledge, whose fruits contained the understanding of all things, from the highest glories to the deepest shadows. Unlike the familiar account that simply forbids Adam and Eve from tasting a single fruit, here, the Creator's instruction was woven into a tender plan for spiritual growth. They were encouraged to eat freely from the tree of life and to bask in the energy of the tree of light, but the tree of knowledge was to be left untouched until their spirits had matured, until they were strong enough to bear the full weight of knowing. Isn't that a profound reflection on our own journeys, that there are truths and powers we must grow into, lest they overwhelm us before we are ready? The Book of Kabra, Nagas chapters 7:3-7, offers yet another glimpse into this astonishing world. It describes a ground so clear, it shimmered like crystal, mirroring the brilliance of heaven itself. Flowers did more than perfume the air. When stirred by gentle breezes, they produced music so exquisite, it might have caused tears to gather in the eyes of anyone who heard. Every creature in this garden was lit from within each, carrying its own soft glow, together, weaving a living symphony of color, light, and sound. Can you almost hear it? Feel it thrumming around you, as if calling some forgotten part of you home. And so beneath all these wonders, a silent question rises. What does it mean that humanity's first dwelling was not merely a place of beauty, but a carefully crafted space for growth, a realm designed to lead souls step by step into their divine destiny? Might your own life even now be patterned with seasons of waiting and learning, so that, when the time is right, you too can taste of deeper knowledge without it becoming a burden too great to bear. There is still so much more hidden in this ancient story, secrets of what went wrong, of choices made, and gifts lost. But for now, let your heart linger here in this garden where heaven brushed the earth, and imagine how differently our world might look if we had never stepped beyond those crystal borders. Wouldn't you like to explore just a little further to see what mysteries still lie ahead? But what might truly send a chill through your heart is the way the Ethiopian Bible recounts the story of temptation. It turns the familiar image we've carried since childhood on its head. In this ancient telling, drawn from the book of Kufa, chapter 5, verses 1-5, the one who came to deceive was no simple serpent slithering through the grass. Instead, temptation arrived, draped in splendor, appearing as a radiant being of light, almost indistinguishable from the holy angels themselves. Imagine standing there beside Eve, seeing this luminous figure step forth with a presence so majestic it could almost be mistaken for the Creator's own. Would you have paused to question it, or would awe have silenced your caution? And this deceiver did not merely rely on clever speech. It possessed the chilling power to conjure vivid illusions, painting breathtaking visions of the future. Right before Eve's astonished eyes, futures overflowing with authority, triumph, and a breathtaking dominion that seemed to stretch without end. Who among us, faced with such dazzling promises, would not feel a flicker of yearning stir inside? Yet it is the Ethiopian account of Eve's particular temptation that pierces deepest. In the Book of Kindness, chapter 8, verses 12-16, we find a detail that sets this version apart from every common telling. The tempter did not lure Eve with mere knowledge, no simple promise that she would understand good and evil. Instead, it offered something far more seductive, the power to create, to shape light and summon life from nothingness, to orchestrate the laws of existence themselves as though she were a second creator. The visions it wove were of worlds that would spring forth under Eve's own command, bending to her will, blooming according to her desires. Can you feel how such a promise might have danced like fire through her thoughts? And what would you have done, standing in Eve's place, gazing upon infinite possibility laid at your feet? Would your heart have raced with the thrill of it, even as some small, quiet voice trembled within. Then comes perhaps the most haunting revelation of all, drawn from the Ethiopian Book of Enoch, chapter 17, verses 8 to 1. When Eve at last offered Adam the forbidden fruit, and he took it from her hand, something irreversible began to unfold. Those eyes of theirs, once clear as crystal, reflecting the very brilliance of heaven, started to cloud. The divine light that had danced within them since their first breath began to gutter like a candle nearly spent, and for the first time they did not merely witness darkness around them. They felt it pooling within their own souls. Isn't that a terrifyingly honest portrayal of sin? Not just breaking a heavenly rule, but the sorrow of watching the divine splendor you were born to carry slowly dim. This ancient telling reveals a truth that many modern hearts shy away from. Sin was never simply about crossing a forbidden line. It was about forfeiting the divine likeness, letting go of something luminous and eternal that once thrived inside. Might this explain why even today, people chase after power or pleasure only to find their inner world growing strangely dimmer? Why there is sometimes a hollow ache where once there seemed to be light? What might it mean for you personally to recognize the temptation often comes clothed in brilliance, offering not just understanding, but godlike power? Could it be that the most dangerous seductions are those that promise to elevate us to thrones we were never meant to occupy? And if the first consequence of yielding was a loss of that radiant spark, how carefully should we guard whatever remains of it within ourselves? The story from here plunges even deeper into shadow and consequence secrets the Ethiopian texts preserve with startling intensity. But for now, let your heart sit with this truth that our greatest losses sometimes begin not with a sinister hiss in the dark, but with a voice that dazzles us with dreams of becoming more than we were ever meant to be. Would you dare to learn what happened next? The Book of Kindness. Chapters 9:1-4 brings this tragic moment into heartbreaking clarity. It describes how that very afternoon, the Creator once more descended into the garden, his radiant presence just as magnificent as it had always been. But something had changed. For the first time since their creation, Adam and Eve could not lift their eyes to meet his light. It wasn't because God's glory had grown harsher or more blinding. It was because something vital within them had been dimmed. They had lost the capacity to behold the divine, their souls now veiled by a shadow that had not existed before. Imagine what it must have felt like for them, hearing those same beloved footsteps that had once filled them with delight, now stirring only dread. Picture them cowering among the luminous trees that used to dance in celebration at God's approach, feeling that the very light which had once embraced them now exposed every hidden fracture in their being. Would your heart not break under the weight of such separation? These revelations from the Ethiopian scriptures are not mere curious embellishments tacked onto a story we thought we already understood. They flip our understanding of sin on its head. Here, the fall is not painted as a simple act of defiance, a hand reaching for forbidden fruit out of childish rebellion. It becomes a far deeper tragedy, a deliberate step away from divine design, an exchange of luminous God-given nature for the hollow promise of personal power. Doesn't this echo eerily through time, finding its way even into our modern struggles, where ambition sometimes eclipses humility, and where the chase for self-made glory dims the very light of compassion and wonder inside us? This telling suggests sin was not merely about breaking a rule. It was about choosing to abandon something sacred, the divine brilliance that had once been interwoven with every fiber of Adam and Eve's being. Could it be that each time we pursue our own elevation at the cost of surrendering to higher wisdom, we repeat in miniature that ancient unraveling? And might this be why so many today feel an ache they cannot name, as if mourning a brilliance their spirit still dimly remembers? So, it brings us to a question too profound to ignore. If humanity was originally crafted with eyes clear enough to look upon God's radiant presence, hearts attuned to angelic speech, and souls overflowing with divine light, is there any hope of restoring what was lost? Could that lost clarity, that breathless intimacy with the Creator, ever be reclaimed? The Ethiopian Bible whispers that the story is not finished. In the next part of this sacred journey, we will step into the heavy consequences of humanity's fall, yet also glimpse the fragile, luminous path that might lead us back to what once was ours. Are you ready to follow where it leads to discover whether that divine spark could still flicker to life within you? Have you ever paused to wonder why across so many cultures and countless generations, people seem haunted by a quiet ache, a sense of being somehow incomplete, as if something essential was lost long ago? The Ethiopian Bible offers an explanation so astonishing, it could forever change how you see not only yourself, but the very world you inhabit. In the book of Kibernast, chapters 10, 1-5, we find a description of the first moments after humanity's fall that is both heartbreakingly beautiful and deeply unsettling. As soon as the divine light withdrew from Adam and Eve, it wasn't just that their once luminous bodies grew heavy and dim. The entire fabric of nature itself responded. Flowers, which had before sung with angelic music whenever touched by the breeze, fell silent. The ground, once like clear crystal that mirrored the radiance of heaven, became dull and opaque. Even more tragic, the language of all living creatures which Adam and Eve had understood with effortless joy now sounded like an indecipherable clamor. Can you imagine suddenly finding yourself cut off from voices you once knew by heart, stranded in a world that had grown strangely cold and mute? Yet, what shakes the soul even more is the cosmic scale of what happened. The book of Kefal, chapter 6, 8-2, reveals that Adam and Eve's choice did more than change their own condition. It tore a fragile seam in reality itself. A crack opened between heaven and earth, and the heavenly light that had once cascaded freely down into the world could no longer pass unimpeded. The 4 crystal rivers flowing from Eden's heights gradually lost their divine glow, becoming mere streams of water. The distance between the realms stretched wider with every heartbeat. Could this be why even today there lingers a sense that something vital lies just beyond reach, that the world is dimmer than it was meant to be, not merely in a spiritual sense, but woven into the very structure of existence? The Ethiopian Book of Enoch, chapters 18, 15-9, takes this tragedy even deeper. Before the fall, Adam and Eve could see both the past and the future as easily as we see the present. They conversed with angels as naturally as with each other, and felt the presence of the Creator infused in every breath they drew. But after that fateful choice, their vision collapsed inward. They could only perceive the material world around them, and the memory of what they had lost, those vast abilities in sacred communion, became a persistent ache in their souls. Can you sense how devastating that must have felt to remember tasting eternity, only to be confined to fleeting moments. There's a particularly haunting image in the book of Con, Ost, chapters 11, 3-7. It describes how after the fall, Adam and Eve turned to look upon each other, and for the first time, they could not see one another's souls. No longer clothed in divine light, they perceived only skin surface emptiness where there had once been radiant depths. This is why the ancient text says they realized they were naked. It wasn't a mere awareness of bare flesh. It was the raw, startling recognition that their souls stood exposed, no longer veiled and protected by heavenly brilliance. Have you ever felt something like that, a painful vulnerability, when you sense someone cannot truly see who you are beneath all your outer layers? Perhaps the most profound revelation of all comes from the book of Kwale, chapters 7, 1-4. It declares that the freedom to choose the power granted to Adam and Eve to chart their own course was the greatest gift the Creator ever bestowed upon them. Yet it was also the most daunting test. Every choice they made did not ripple outward merely to touch their own lives. It sent tremors through the entire tapestry of creation, bending reality itself in ways that would echo far beyond their brief days. Could this explain why, even now, your own choices seem to carry more weight than you sometimes wish? Why a single decision can alter not just your path, but quietly reshape the world around you. So this story of humanity's ancient fall isn't simply about moral failure or spiritual sorrow. It's about the breaking of a cosmic harmony, a dimming of lights that once danced all around and within us. It calls us to consider if our first ancestors lived with such brilliance, and if their loss reshaped reality itself, might there still be a path to recover, even a fragment of what was lost? The Ethiopian texts promise that the journey does not end here. Ahead lies the exploration of consequence, but also of hope, woven through with whispers of redemption. Would you walk further into this mystery to see if the light they forfeited might one day glow again in you? What may surprise you most of all is how the Ethiopian Bible perceives the possibility of redemption. Its ancient pages do not paint humanity's fall as a final closed door. Instead, they whisper of a hidden hope that pulses quietly within every human heart. In the Ethiopian Book of Enoch, chapters 19:8-2, it is written that although the divine light once blazed within Adam and Eve, and now seems only a distant memory, it was never fully snuffed out. Even after all the dimming, every human soul still shelters a tiny spark, a fragile yet immortal seed of that original divine potential. Doesn't that stir something deep within you, like a long-lost memory trying to surface? This is the tender foundation upon which the entire hope of redemption rests. It suggests that buried beneath layers of fear, selfish ambition, and worldly distractions, there remains in you and in every person you meet a flicker of that first light waiting to catch flame once more. Could this explain why so many are drawn to stories of transformation, why we feel an ache when witnessing acts of true love or sacrifice? Perhaps our souls still recognize the glow of the divine when it shines through another. The book of Con Ost, chapters 12:5-9, takes this idea even deeper. It reveals that the Creator's mercy does not simply erase the consequences of humanity's ancient choice. Instead, His compassion manifests by offering humans the priceless chance to slowly rebuild what was lost. Redemption here is not pictured as a sudden miracle that wipes away every scar. It is a tender, gradual process, a sacred journey of restoration. Every act of kindness you extend, every time you pause to understand someone's pain or lift a burden that is not your own, it brightens that tiny ember in your soul. Can you imagine what might happen if you lived each day conscious of this, that with every gentle choice, you are coaxing divine light back to life within yourself? This is a profoundly hopeful and beautifully practical vision of salvation. It transforms redemption from a distant mystical event into something woven through your ordinary moments. Could it be that when you forgive a wound that still smarts, when you speak truth, though it costs you, or when you create beauty that echoes eternity, you are actually participating in this great restoration? Might this be why Proverbs says, "The path of the righteous is like the morning sun shining ever brighter till the full light of day"? Then comes a revelation in the book of Kuale, chapters 8:15 to 18, that lifts this entire story into an even higher realm. It proclaims that the road back to divine light is not a backward trek to some long-lost paradise, not an attempt to undo history by sneaking once more through Eden's gates. Instead, it is a forward journey into a higher state of consciousness, a place where humanity can fully embrace the gift of free will while living in joyous harmony with divine purpose. What might it mean for you to step toward that kind of life, to wield your freedom, not for grasping power or fleeting pleasure, but to weave yourself again into the gentle order of heaven's design? These insights from the Ethiopian Bible are not dusty explanations of an ancient misstep. They form a luminous framework for understanding where we stand right now, surrounded by both shadows and glimmers of light. They whisper that you are not forever broken, that the story of humanity is not locked in tragedy. Instead, they hold out a promise that by grasping more fully what was lost, you might begin the long, beautiful journey to recover the divine capacities still sleeping within you. And this brings us to something even more intriguing. What happens when we place these profound teachings alongside the wisdom found in other spiritual traditions? Could these ancient truths illuminate not only our private souls, but also the shared struggles of a modern, fractured world? That is where we will wander next, into a broader exploration of how these revelations might shape our understanding of ourselves and our place among countless seekers across time. Wouldn't you like to see how these threads connect? Let us begin this exploration by comparing these remarkable Ethiopian accounts with the Hebrew Bible most people are familiar with. In Genesis 2:7, the narrative is simple, direct, and deeply rooted in the earth. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Here we see humanity's creation as something profoundly tied to the soil, a being sculpted from humble earth, animated by divine breath, yet unmistakably born of dust. Isn't it striking how this passage grounds us so firmly in the material, reminding us that our very flesh is kin to clay? But then we turn to the Ethiopian book of Kebron Nist, chapters 3:12 to 15, and suddenly the story blooms into a grand cosmic tapestry. In this telling, the Creator does not simply stoop to gather soil from beneath his feet. Instead, he sends forth his servants to the far reaches of the universe, to the blazing east, the dusky west, the frozen mysteries of the north, and the warm, life-laden currents of the south. From each distant realm, they collect sacred earth imbued with different divine qualities. Then, in a breathtaking act of intimacy, the Creator does more than breathe life into this unique blend of cosmic dust. He infuses it with a radiant spark, a fragment of His own divine essence. This is not a trivial variation. It reveals a dramatically different vision of who we are. In the Hebrew text, humanity stands as a majestic creation. Yes, but firmly anchored in the soil, dependent on God, yet unmistakably of earth. In contrast, the Ethiopian tradition suggests that from the very first heartbeat, humans were more than merely animated clay. We were living vessels of divinity itself, woven from the universe's most sacred substances, and carrying within us a piece of God's own eternal light. Doesn't that ignite a question in your own heart? What might your daily life look like if you truly believed a sliver of the divine was glowing quietly inside you? The comparison grows even more compelling when we turn our eyes to Eve. In Genesis 2:21-22, the account is familiar. God causes Adam to fall into a deep sleep, removes one of his ribs, and fashions it into a woman. It is a story that has shaped countless interpretations about the relationship between men and women, often emphasizing woman as derivative of man, a helper formed second sculpted from an existing part of Adam's body. But the Ethiopian book of Kuale, chapters 4:8-2, offers a revelation so surprising, it feels like stepping into sunlight after centuries in shadow. Here, Eve is not drawn from Adam's side at all. Instead, she is created from pure light divine illumination, gathered by the Creator, to form a being who radiates her own brilliance. Eve emerges as a creature of independent glow, her spirit alive with the wisdom of angels, not a mere echo or extension of Adam, but a companion fashioned in parallel splendor. Can you sense how revolutionary this vision was, especially considering the era in which these texts were cherished? This interpretation suggests that from the dawn of existence, there was no hierarchy inscribed between man and woman, no secondary status written into the bones of creation. Instead, it proposes an original equality so profound that it still challenges hearts and minds today. Could it be that our modern struggles for mutual respect and shared dignity are not some new social invention, but an ancient truth trying to break through layers of misunderstanding? These Ethiopian accounts invite us to see humanity, both male and female, not merely as earthbound creatures granted breath, but as luminous beings bearing sparks of the divine, formed to stand side by side. How might the world change if more of us truly lived by such a vision? What relationship societies, even entire nations, might heal if we returned to this understanding of humanity's sacred shared origin. And so, from the very outset, this comparison reveals more than a scholarly curiosity. It strikes at the very heart of how we view ourselves and one another. Ahead, we'll explore how these ancient insights resonate or diverge when placed alongside other spiritual traditions, and what they might still offer. A world desperately searching for its lost light. Particularly striking is the way the Ethiopian book of Enoch, chapters 25-9, portrays the relationship humanity once had with all of creation. Before the great fracture that history would come to call the fall, Adam and Eve lived in a harmony so profound it is almost beyond imagining. They could understand the language of every creature, from the smallest whisper of an ant as it journeyed across a blade of grass, to the songs woven by the distant stars that crowned the heavens. They did not stand above nature, as harsh rulers imposing their will. They walked within it as tender guardians, interpreters of a grand cosmic voice that spoke through rivers' winds and the silent growth of trees. Can you imagine what it would feel like to kneel beside a flower and truly hear its song, or to look up at the night sky and comprehend the stories the constellations were telling? This isn't just some quaint, long-lost myth. When we hold these revelations up against our modern age, they cast a sobering light on our current struggles. The Book of Kin Ost, chapters 13:8-2, warns that when humanity loses the ability to hear nature's language, something tragic happens. We begin to see the world not as a living tapestry we belong to, but as a collection of resources to be plundered. Isn't that painfully close to the reality we face today? A planet scarred by greed and ignorance, forests and oceans groaning under the weight of exploitation. Could it be that our ecological crises are not just failures of policy or science, but deep spiritual deafness, a forgetting of our first sacred role? The Ethiopian texts press this point even further. The Book of Kuala, chapters 9:15-9, reveals that the fall was never simply about plucking forbidden fruit from a tempting branch. It was about humanity's desire to seize control over the very laws of nature, to decide for themselves how creation should run, instead of dwelling in humble partnership with it. In an age where artificial intelligence stretches toward sentience and biotechnology seeks to rewrite the codes of life itself, does this ancient warning not sound more urgent than ever? Might we be standing once again at the edge of a garden gate, tempted by visions of limitless power, yet blind to the cost? Yet these writings do not leave us adrift in guilt or despair. The Ethiopian Book of Enoch, chapters 21:3-7, offers a vision of restoration that is both challenging and deeply hopeful. It teaches that the journey back to divine light does not demand we abandon knowledge. Rather, it calls us to learn how to wield it with reverence, to couple insight with humility, discovery with respect for the delicate order that the Creator wove into every atom and star. What would our technologies look like if guided by such sacred restraint? How different might our cities' economies, even our most private ambitions, be if lit by this kind of wisdom? These ancient lessons craft a timeless framework for navigating our very modern dilemmas. They remind us that true advancement does not lie in accumulating knowledge alone, but in growing wise enough to use that knowledge without tearing the soul from the world. The Book of Konagast, chapters 14:1-4, captures this beautifully. It declares that each generation is entrusted with its own profound test to balance the scales between knowledge and wisdom, progress and preservation, individual freedom, and the shared responsibility we owe to all creation. Isn't it humbling to realize that our choices today ripple out in much the same way Adam and Eve's first decision once did, shaping not only our destinies, but the very fabric of life around us? Perhaps this is the most urgent message the Ethiopian Bible has to offer our 21st century hearts. These teachings stretch across time not to bind us in regret for what was lost, but to beckon us toward what might still be restored. Ahead lies the final leg of this journey, where we will gather up the most profound truths these ancient words have offered to see how they might yet guide humanity toward a future bright with rediscovered light. Would you walk a little farther to glimpse the treasures waiting at the story's end? Let us first consider the extraordinary research value of these ancient texts, a value that reaches far beyond mere historical curiosity. In the final chapter of the book of Konas, verses 1 to 5, it boldly declares that these words are not just a sacred inheritance for one nation or one lineage. They are a luminous treasury of wisdom, meant for all humanity, stretching across cultures, continents, and epochs. They contain more than old stories etched into the sands of time. Within them pulse profound insights into the nature of reality itself and the breathtaking heights of human potential. Isn't it remarkable to think that scrolls penned millennia ago might still hold keys to mysteries we are only now beginning to ask? From a scholarly vantage, the Ethiopian Bible opens a rare window into the heart of ancient civilizations. It reveals how our ancestors perceived their world, a universe alive with divine purpose, intertwined with every breath they took. Yet, it offers more than just relics of bygone thinking. In the final chapter of the book of Kuala, verses 8 to 12, we find a compelling admonition. Each generation must approach these words with fresh eyes and open hearts, for layered within them are meanings suited uniquely to each era. Could this be why even today we find new relevance blooming from these ancient pages, as if they were seeds lying dormant until our present needs called them to life? Culturally and historically, these texts carry a rare beauty. They offer not merely an alternative telling of stories we thought we knew, but entirely different perspectives that challenge, enrich, and sometimes even unsettle our comfortable assumptions. Isn't it humbling to realize that truth may not always wear the familiar face we expect? The Ethiopian Book of Enoch, in its final chapter, verses 15 to 19, frames this idea with striking clarity. It teaches that truth is never a solitary tale whispered by a single voice. Rather, it is a vast chorus, a synthesis, born from countless vantage points, each adding color, depth, and resonance. Only by stepping back to see all these perspectives woven together can we begin to glimpse the full tapestry. What might it change in your own life if you approached every story, every belief, every person with that same wide-hearted openness? For our modern world, entangled in crisis, clamoring with conflicting voices, there emerge three particularly radiant lessons from the Ethiopian Bible that feel almost tailored for our time. The first is about our relationship with nature. In the Book of Kindness, chapters 15, 3-7, humanity is portrayed not as nature's master, there to conquer and subdue, but as its guardian and interpreter entrusted to listen and speak on behalf of all living things. It warns that when we lose this sacred ability to hear nature's subtle language, the sigh of wind through trees, the murmur of rivers, the quiet grief of a wounded earth, we also lose a piece of our own divine likeness. Could this be why so many today feel a hollow ache they cannot name even amid modern abundance? The second great lesson speaks powerfully to gender equality. Remember how the Ethiopian Bible describes Eve not drawn from Adam's rib, but formed from pure light, bearing her own radiant essence. This detail is far more than poetic flourish. It lays a spiritual cornerstone for equality, declaring that from the very dawn of time, man and woman were created side by side, each reflecting unique facets of divine brilliance. In a world still wrestling fiercely with this issue, might this ancient vision offer a healing blueprint? The third lesson concerns the weighty question of knowledge and power. In the final chapter of the Book of Kuala, verses 20 to 24, we find a sobering reminder. Knowledge is never meant for domination, nor is power given for tyranny. Instead, knowledge exists to serve to illuminate the hidden corners of creation for the good of all. Power is entrusted to protect, to nurture life rather than trample it. Imagine how different our technology's governments and even personal ambitions might look if we all lived by this creed. Taken together, these teachings form a timeless compass guiding not just scholars and theologians, but every searching heart. They whisper that true progress lies not merely in what we can build or discover, but in learning to balance wisdom with wonder, freedom with responsibility, ambition with deep humility. Isn't that precisely the kind of vision our fractured century is crying out for? As we come to the end of this journey together, I'd like to pause and offer a more personal reflection. Throughout the many hours spent delving into the pages of the Ethiopian Bible, tracing its intricate stories, puzzling over its mysteries, and marveling at its unexpected revelations, I found that what moved me most was not simply the unusual details, or even the profound differences from the scriptures many of us grew up with. What left the deepest imprint on my heart was the quiet, unwavering consistency of its message. Threaded through every chapter, whispered by every ancient verse, is a profound truth about humanity. We are beings of astonishing potential, crafted from sacred elements bearing sparks of divine light. We were designed for wonders beyond what most of us dare to imagine. And yet, and perhaps, this is the most vital part, this potential does not reach its fullness through pride, through the relentless grasping for power, or through setting ourselves above others. It blossoms only through humility, through compassion, through living with a tender awareness of our deep responsibility to the larger web of life that cradles us all. Isn't there something beautifully reassuring in this? That despite the countless centuries that separate us from those who first penned these words, the heart of our human struggle remains so recognizably the same. The Ethiopian Book of Enoch in its final chapters 25 to 28 captures this with quiet power. It says that each generation will inevitably face its own unique tests, new faces, new circumstances, new temptations. But the essential nature of the challenge never changes. It is always this: to live in such a way that we honor the divine brilliance seated within us all, while remaining humble enough to see ourselves as intimately tied to the whole. When you think about it, isn't this also the story of our modern lives? We strive to achieve, to learn to build, often pushed forward by dreams that glow brightly within us. But true greatness, the kind that resonates beyond our brief lifespans, requires us to temper that drive with gentleness. To ask not only how high we can climb, but how deeply we can love, how faithfully we can serve, how tenderly we can nurture the fragile threads that bind us to each other and to all creation. So as we close this exploration of the Ethiopian Bible, perhaps the real invitation is not simply to marvel at its ancient wisdom, but to let that wisdom stir something within us, to become in our own humble way living chapters of this same story, people who walk gently, shine brightly, and carry forward the sacred work of becoming fully, beautifully human. If this journey touched your heart, even a little, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it, so more people can join us in rediscovering these forgotten treasures. And I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. What part of this story resonated most with you? Feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you for walking this path with me. May the small spark of divine light within you grow ever brighter, lighting not only your way, but also illuminating the path for many still searching in the dusk. I can't wait to see you in our next exploration. Until then, take care and stay wonderfully curious.